On the morning of August 17, 1944, in the rolling fields of northern France near Falaise, a lone American supply truck rested crookily at the edge of a rural road. Its khaki canvas had been ripped apart by jagged shrapnel, and the engine still emitted faint warmth as if the machine were catching its breath after escaping death. A Luftwaffe fighter, one of the few remaining German aircraft brave or desperate enough to fly over France that late in the war, had swept across the convoy hours earlier, strafing it and leaving this GMC CCKW abandoned like a stranded beast. As the dust settled and silence reclaimed the countryside, mechanics from the German 276th Infantry Division approached cautiously, their boots pressed into the soft soil as they circled the captured American Deuce-and-a-Half. Speaking quietly in their clipped accents, one sergeant waved over another specialist. "Bring the tools," he said. "This one looks untouched." Over the next hour, as they probed deeper into what the Americans simply called a truck, their quiet observations confirmed a growing realization, one that many German officers had begun whispering since the Normandy landings. Germany had already lost the war long before this moment, not because its soldiers lacked courage, and not because its engineers lacked talent, but because the factories across the Atlantic, those sprawling industrial giants in Detroit, were producing war machines at a scale no European nation could match. This captured vehicle seemed like an unimpressive workhorse, yet it symbolized a crushing truth. American mass production had become a weapon as powerful as any tank or aircraft. The German mechanics had seen American trucks before, but they had never taken the time to dissect one so thoroughly. Compared to their own Opel Blitz, this GMC CCKW felt enormous, rated at 2.5 tons. It overshadowed the Opels in both size and presence. But what truly shocked them wasn't its bulk. It was its simplicity. Removing the hood revealed a 6-cylinder engine that looked almost friendly, with parts openly accessible, each component clearly labeled in neat English letters. When one mechanic opened the toolbox strapped to the running board, he frowned in surprise. Inside were ordinary wrenches, pliers, and a maintenance booklet printed on high-quality paper. Leafing through its pages, he saw detailed illustrations that explained every task step by step. Even a child could follow these. He muttered in disbelief. They learned the truck was a 1943 CCKW 353, its production markings stamped proudly into the metal. A single factory in Pontiac, Michigan had produced thousands of these machines in the same year. The Germans stared at the number for a long moment, calculating silently. Thousands from one plant, how many such factories did the Americans have? That realization alone deepened the knot in their stomachs. Their technical examination revealed the heart of American manufacturing philosophy. The engine, named the GMC 270, produced around 104 horsepower. Not impressive by German performance standards, but it wasn't meant to be extraordinary. It was meant to be easy. Every bolt seemed to share the same size. A single wrench could loosen half the truck. The spark plugs were positioned to be changed quickly, the oil filter removable without any tools. One mechanic scoffed, "This is built for idiots." But the senior technician shook his head. "No, this is built for an army of men who are mechanics. It's smarter than anything we've made." He was right. The truck embodied a design philosophy rooted not in precision perfection, but in practicality. The American Army consisted of millions of citizen soldiers, farm boys, clerks, welders, men who had to become drivers and mechanics practically overnight. This truck had been built with them in mind. Every component was chosen not for sophistication, but for durability and ease of replacement. Nothing required special knowledge. Nothing required delicate handling. When they studied the six-wheel drive system, the contrast with their own equipment became painful. The GMC's front axle could be engaged with a single simple lever. Their Opel Blitz trucks were only rear-wheel drive, constantly bogging down in France's soft soil, demanding careful maneuvering to avoid disaster. This American machine, on the other hand, could claw through terrain that would trap a German vehicle within minutes. Its suspension used straightforward leaf springs, not elegant, not refined, but nearly indestructible. The Germans thought of their own beautifully engineered torsion bar suspensions. Brilliant on paper, fragile in war, achievable only with factory tools. The leaf springs on the GMC could practically be straightened with a hammer and a tree stump, but the most sobering blow came from the numbers. Stamped on the truck's frame was the identification of Pontiac Plant Number 1. The serial number indicated it was only one out of roughly 150,000 produced in a single year. One German mechanic did quick math and shook his head. If one American factory made that many, how many more were churning out identical machines? The answer was chilling. Dozens. GM, Ford, Dodge, International Harvester, Studebaker, each producing trucks like this according to the same specifications, their parts interchangeable as if all came from a single assembly line. Later that evening, the division supply officer, a man who had worked at the Opel plant in Brandenburg before the war, joined them. He ran his hand along the truck's fender thoughtfully. "We're seeing this all wrong," he said. "We look at this and see a basic truck, but this thing represents an entire industrial philosophy that we simply cannot match." He pointed out the stamped metal panels. Crude perhaps, but so quick to manufacture that any factory with a press could make them. The wooden bed was constructed from ordinary lumber. The canvas top came from commercial fabric suppliers. Everything about the truck screamed availability, abundance, and speed. There was nothing exotic, nothing rare, nothing Germany could not produce, if only it had the capacity. He motioned toward the chassis and explained further. "This ladder frame is just straight steel channels welded together. Any steelworks could make these pieces. Our Opel requires specialized shaping tools and precision forms. The Americans built around their strengths. Massive industrial output, limitless standardization, and the ability to replicate machines on a huge scale. The Germans built around craftsmanship, beautiful, efficient machines designed by brilliant engineers, but produced in numbers too small to matter." He spoke soberly as he made his final calculation. "Last year, we built maybe 27,000 Blitz trucks. The Americans likely built 20 times as many GMCs alone." He was wrong. If anything, he underestimated it. By war's end, U.S. factories would produce over 500,000 CCKW trucks, while total German production of the Opel Blitz would barely reach a fraction of that. For the next week, the German unit used the captured truck for resupply missions, and it transformed their lives. Where their Opels spun helplessly in muddy farm roads, the GMC surged forward confidently. When overloaded, something German trucks often struggled with, the American truck simply shrugged and carried on. Its six-wheel drive system provided relentless traction, and its rugged frame absorbed punishment like it welcomed it. One supply sergeant who drove it daily summed it up perfectly. "This isn't better craftsmanship. It's built expecting stupidity, brutality, and neglect. They designed it for chaos." That was the revelation. American engineers had built this machine for wartime reality, not for peacetime ideals. They assumed the worst: poor training, sloppy maintenance, terrible roads, and created a vehicle that would continue running despite all errors. On August 25, 1944, the same day the famed Red Ball Express began racing supplies across France, the 276th Infantry Division received orders to retreat eastward. As they moved out, they witnessed something that completed their education in American logistics. On a parallel road, an American supply convoy rolled past. It wasn't a tactical formation. It wasn't heading to battle. It was simply a supply column going about its daily business. After 30 minutes of watching an endless line of trucks, the Germans stopped counting. The vehicles stretched from one horizon to the other. Mostly GM CCKWs, all identical, all carrying fuel, ammunition, food, everything a modern army needed to keep moving. A young German soldier stared at the motorized juggernaut and asked in utter confusion, "Where are their horses?" He had only known war supported by animals. Their division alone relied on more than 5,000 horses to move supplies. Those animals needed food, water, rest, and shelter. They marched slowly and died easily. The Americans had none of that burden. They had trucks. Tens of thousands of trucks. The supply officer later calculated that each American division likely had around 2,000 vehicles. With 40 divisions already in France, that meant roughly 80,000 trucks, not counting the huge logistics services behind them. Germany had perhaps 100,000 trucks total across all fronts, much of their logistical burden carried by 3 million horses. The contrast was devastating. As weeks passed, the Germans captured more American vehicles, a few GMCs, a Dodge WC-63, and discovered something extraordinary. Parts were interchangeable not only between GMC trucks, but between completely different manufacturers. A GMC component fit a Dodge. Electrical systems matched. Even tires shared sizes. They standardized their whole army. The supply officer observed. Every model, every company, built to one specification. In comparison, the Wehrmacht fielded dozens of incompatible designs. A mechanic trained on one vehicle often couldn't repair another. Warehouses had to stock hundreds of different parts. German logistics was a patchwork. American logistics was a single, unified machine. In early October, the Germans' remaining vehicles ran out of fuel. Their horses could forage in the fields, but their trucks, all but the captured American ones, sat immobilized. Meanwhile, American supply operations continued without interruption. Their logistical machine, built on the sturdy backs of vehicles like the GMC, functioned like a living organism that never slept. By winter, German high command reports echoed the same grim conclusions. American trucks weren't superior individually, but the overwhelming quantity, and the manufacturing system behind them, had created an unstoppable logistical tide. When the Ardennes offensive began in December 1944, Germany's final desperate assault depended on capturing American fuel because they lacked enough of their own. German troops were instructed to use captured Allied vehicles whenever possible because their logistics couldn't keep pace. It was a bitter irony. They needed the very trucks that symbolized their strategic defeat. As 1945 arrived, the truth could no longer be ignored. Captured American trucks kept running despite harsh conditions, while the remaining German vehicles failed one after another. The differences weren't just mechanical, they were philosophical. American machines were made to endure war. German machines were made to excel, but not necessarily survive chaos. By March 1945, as the Allies crossed the Rhine in overwhelming force, the mechanics of the 276th Infantry Division watched with a mixture of admiration and despair. Endless columns of American vehicles rolled forward with precision, maintaining a supply chain that seemed impossible to break. Their senior mechanic remarked quietly, "They built an army that lives on logistics, and they built logistics no army can stop. We built for short, decisive campaigns. They built for a storm that never ends." And that was the truth. Germany had crafted beautiful machines. America had crafted an industrial empire. In the end, it was the empire that won. No one among us imagined we'd reach this point, a point with a constant grind of battle, stretched out for years, collided with the overwhelming reality of facing an opponent who could replace what we destroyed faster than we could fire upon it. By April 18, 1945, the inevitable finally arrived. Our division laid down its weapons and surrendered. The war, at least for us, was finished. But the lessons were not. We were taken into custody and herded toward processing centers in the very machines that had shadowed us throughout the conflict. American GMC trucks. Sitting in the back of those rumbling giants, we gained one last, unmistakable insight into the industrial engine that had powered the Allied war machine. At the intake point near Koblenz, we were met with a sight that stunned even the most seasoned among us. Row upon row of American trucks lined up in neat formations, each one ready for service like soldiers awaiting inspection. Young American servicemen moved between them with an ease that felt almost casual. They worked with a confidence that was rare in our ranks, because they could. Their workshops overflowed with tools. Replacement parts were stacked so high they resembled small buildings. Manuals with clear diagrams and plain language explained every maintenance task, designed so simply that even a farm boy drafted weeks earlier could perform what we considered advanced mechanical work. One of our own mechanics, a man who had spent years refining the intricacies of German engines, found himself speaking with an American motor sergeant. Despite the circumstances, the sergeant seemed surprisingly open, almost friendly. "We're short on mechanics," he said, pointing his thumb toward the rows of GMCs. "You know your way around these things." "We have serviced a few captured ones," our man replied. "Good. War's over for you, but these trucks won't fix themselves. I can put you to work in the motor pool. Better than rotting behind fences." And so began an unexpected chapter. Over the next several weeks, captured German mechanics worked side by side with American soldiers, repairing and maintaining the very vehicles that had carried Allied supplies and troops across continents. The Americans didn't hide their methods. In fact, they explained their philosophy freely, almost proudly. "We build everything for speed and simplicity," the sergeant said one afternoon, tapping a greasy hand against a GMC engine block. "Common parts, straightforward procedures. Two men with the right tools could tear this engine down and rebuild it in 8 hours. Try doing that with one of yours." Our mechanic could only nod. He knew the truth all too well. The Opel engines back home required precision environments, factory floors, specialized instruments, expert hands. German design excelled in meticulous craftsmanship. But craftsmanship did not win the war. "Your designs are beautiful," the sergeant continued, "but ours keep moving. That's the difference. We didn't aim for perfection. We aimed for what works in a fight." When asked how many of these GMC trucks had rolled off American assembly lines, the sergeant shrugged. "Hundreds of thousands. Over 500,000 of this model alone. And don't forget the Dodges, the Studebakers, the Internationals. Millions of trucks, all told. That's what beat you. Numbers you couldn't break, no matter how many you destroyed." He said it without arrogance. It was simply fact. The deeper our mechanics worked with the Americans, the more they realized what truly separated the two sides. America had not only possessed vast industrial capacity, they possessed an approach to manufacturing built specifically for mass production. Their trucks were not fundamentally new creations. Many were adaptations of commercial designs, civilian engines, civilian transmissions, only strengthened and replicated in staggering quantities. Simplicity, interchangeability, reliability, those were the guiding principles. Months passed in the camps. Many of our men continued working in American motor pools, seeing firsthand the sheer magnitude of Allied logistics. Endless convoys moved supplies across what remained of Germany. Repair stations overflowed with spare parts, more parts than entire German divisions had been issued over the course of the war. So streamlined was their production that worn-out trucks were often replaced entirely. New ones arrived faster than old ones could be repaired. By the end of 1945, repatriation began. Those who returned home found a devastated nation. Entire cities had been reduced to skeletal ruins. Factories stood silent. Many collapsed under the weight of bombings. Yet American vehicles were everywhere. GMC trucks delivered reconstruction materials. Jeeps ferried occupation personnel. Their equipment formed the scaffolding upon which our shattered nation would slowly rise again. One former Wehrmacht mechanic found a job at a Frankfurt reconstruction depot. His experience with American vehicles, once gained as a prisoner, now made him invaluable to the recovery effort. Training young Germans in maintenance, he often reflected aloud on what the war had truly taught him. "We believed precision alone would win," he said. But the Americans understood something deeper. They built enormous quantities of equipment that was reliable, simple, and uniform. "We designed perfect machines for an army of specialists we never truly had. They designed good machines for an army of ordinary men." That difference, more than anything, won the war. As the Marshall Plan expanded across Europe, much of its aid traveled on the backs of American trucks. German mechanics maintained those same vehicles, applying every lesson they had painfully learned during the conflict. When German industries rose from the rubble, many adopted American methods: standardization, interchangeable parts, manufacturing efficiency, while preserving German engineering precision. The result was a new generation of vehicles. The Volkswagens, the BMWs, the Mercedes-Benz models that blended elegance with mass producibility. The GMC CCKW became a legend in its own right, serving the U.S. military into the 1960s and continuing in foreign service for decades. The Opel Blitz, despite its qualities, became a symbol of what Germany lacked: the industrial capacity to produce enough of them. Years later, in a 1967 interview, a former German mechanic turned consultant summarized the lesson bluntly. "In war, perfect machines lose to good machines built in overwhelming quantities. America didn't defeat us with superior engineering, but with a system capable of delivering more than we could ever hope to match." Beside his words in that article stood a photograph of a restored GMC CCKW, and, beside it, an Opel Blitz. The contrast was unmistakable. One represented unstoppable production. The other represented brilliance limited by scarcity. Those German mechanics who had once examined a captured GMC truck in 1944 understood before most of their commanders what it meant. They had glimpsed the future through the hood of an American engine. They knew then what history would later confirm: that industrial philosophy, more than individual machines, decided the fate of nations. For them, the GMC was not merely a truck. It was a hard teacher, a reminder that in the modern age, quantity can carry a power that even the finest engineering cannot overcome. The lessons they learned, first as prisoners and later as rebuilding citizens, helped shape the rebirth of a nation, and their admission that Germany lost not because it lacked talent, but because it misunderstood the demands of industrial warfare, became the quiet truth upon which modern German industry was rebuilt.